If you ask the average automotive enthusiast who makes the best luxury sedans, the answer will almost always be the Germans. BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz have been dominating this category for decades. But as we enter the electric era, that dominance has never felt more fragile. And there are plenty of brands that would love to topple the German trio. Brands like Stelato with their all-new S9. The Chinese cars we review here on the channel have pretty much every smart feature you could want, but not every car is quite so smart. If that sounds like your car, then you're going to love the sponsor for today's video, the Sunweyer SW12 LITE. If your car already supports wired CarPlay, the SW12 LITE can turn your existing center screen into a multi-function entertainment center. The device itself is compact with a metal frame and high-strength glass panels that make it durable and attractive. You can also choose between 256 different colors for the customizable ambient light. Startup speeds are fast, and it supports wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, as well as Android Cast and iPhone AirPlay. It also has 6 built-in apps to meet your daily entertainment needs. Since the SW12 LITE supports dual 5G Wi-Fi, you can seamlessly switch between using CarPlay and watching videos without interrupting the connection. The Sunweyer SW12 LITE is a great way to make your car more entertaining and more convenient. Click the link below to learn how you can get yours now.
Welcome to Wheelsboy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.
Would you like to come to China and drive some of these interesting Chinese cars and see some of the most fascinating and important auto shows in the world? You are the perfect candidate for the Wheelsboy EV Tour. That's right, we are inviting our fans to join us here in China in 2025 for 3 different events. Shanghai in April, Chengdu in August, and Guangzhou in November. Registration for the Shanghai event, which is based around the Shanghai Auto Show, the world's most important auto show by far, has already begun. So reach out now to tour@wheelsboy.cn to learn how you can register and join. If you're thinking this looks a whole lot like the Luxeed S7 that we reviewed, there's a good reason for that. While they come from different brands, both of those brands are joint ventures between the tech company Huawei and a Chinese automaker. In the case of Stelato, it's Huawei and BAIC, or BAIC, known for creating impressive vehicles like the, okay, I'll be honest, BAIC doesn't really make any impressive vehicles that I can think of, and that also applies to all of Huawei's other joint venture partners like JAC, Chery, and Ceres. They are B-tier automakers here in China at best. I'm sure Huawei has their own reasons for joining up with the proverbial bench riders of the Chinese automotive industry, but one of the distinguishing features of all of these brands is a shared design language. That's why the S9 looks like a larger version of the Luxeed S7 sedan, or the sedan version of the Ito M9 SUV. I wasn't a huge fan of the styling of the Ito M9 SUV, particularly on the front end. I thought that the headlight design made it look like it had giant bags under his eyes, like it was exhausted. If the Ito M9 was a person, it would be a single mother of 2 that's working 3 jobs. After some initial hesitation, however, I have come to quite like the styling on the S9, including here on the front end. The frontal area is obviously much smaller than the M9 SUV, and so they had to shrink down these headlights in order to make them fit the design, and I think the resulting proportions are much nicer than on the M9. I can't say that every aspect of this car's proportions are perfect, however. If you look from the profile, I really like the first 3/4 of it, but once you get to the last quarter of it, where they have the roofline, I don't know, it looks like they tried to combine the fastback look of a Panamera with a traditional 3-box sedan, and the resulting design is just really heavy. Credit where credit is due, however. The S9, unlike some electric sedans like the Mercedes-Benz EQS or the BMW i7, doesn't look as tall as an SUV. That's because its 100 kilowatt-hour NCM battery pack is thinner than the ones in the Mercedes-Benz or the BMW, as well as many of its Chinese rivals. As a result, and including these amazing multi-spoke 21-inch wheels, which are I love them. This thing has a nice presence, but also doesn't look like it's about to compete in a rock crawling competition.
That thinner than average battery still promises a claimed CLTC range of 721 or 816 kilometers, depending on whether you get the single motor or dual motor powertrain.
The S9 continues the proud tradition of other Chinese electric sedans like the Denza Z9 and Neo ET7 by having a pretty small rear cargo area. In fact, it's the same size as the Denza Z9 at 375 liters, so I have to say it doesn't feel as small as the Z9s. That's probably because this opening is quite large, and while it does have something that juts into the rear cargo area, like the Z9, it doesn't jut as far in, so it doesn't feel like it bisects the entire cargo area. Also, this has storage underneath the floor, and it has a frunk, though a small one. The second row is the highlight of this car and also my greatest source of consternation, so let's start by talking about here. This thing is supposed to compete with the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, Audi A8, and BMW 7 Series, or the electric variants of all of those, but that's really a non-starter, simply from a size perspective. This thing is really big, including its wheelbase of 3,050 millimeters, but it's also significantly smaller than the wheelbase of even a short wheelbase Mercedes-Benz S-Class. It's also got a shorter wheelbase than the E-Class L, a stretched version of the E-Class that we get here in the Chinese car market. But while it can't compete with the Germans in terms of size, it absolutely pummels them when it comes to price and features. The base version of this car starts at $55,000 US, and if you want a top spec car like this with all of the optional features, including the 21-inch wheels and others, it's $66,000 USD. For that money, you get an absolutely insane list of features. We're talking some incredibly comfortable seats, for example, with heated, cooled, and massaging functions front and rear, and an incredible level of adjustability, specifically back here in the second row. We're talking about forward and aft, we're talking about adjustable rake, leg rests, every kind of feature you think you could adjust, you can adjust with these seats. If you fold down the center armrest, you will find a small touch screen here, which you can use to control the functions I mentioned before, like the heating, cooling, and massaging seats, as well as other functions that we'll get to in a moment. Behind that, a little storage area with a single USB Type-C charging port. That's also a wireless charging pad right here. But behind all of that is the refrigerator. Yes, this is a refrigerated and heated storage area, which, I've got to be honest, I'm not surprised to see in a Chinese car at this price point, which really says something about the current Chinese car market. But if you watch our videos, you already knew that's something. I want to close this though, because I want to show you something else on the door. This looks like nothing more than two Type-C charging ports, does it not? Well, they are absolutely not Type-C charging ports. They're actually lights. The one on the left, I understand. When this thing is in refrigerating mode, it is blue. When you turn it to heating mode, it is red or orange. The one on the right is white, all the time. It also seems to be on, all the time, even when you turn off the refrigerator. I'm entirely unsure what the purpose of this light is, and I really just can't figure out how to find out. If you want to achieve maximum comfort, and you happen to be sitting in the right-hand seat, you can activate the one-touch zero gravity mode.
副驾座椅正在折叠，请注意前后排人员物品安全。零重力座椅正在展开，请注意前后排人员安全。
Yes, this seating position is as comfortable as it first appears, and you can adjust the screen right here so that it's much easier to use. As you can see, up to 45 degrees, but I still don't recommend that you actually use this while driving for two reasons. First of all, it's not particularly safe in my opinion. Seat belts are not really designed to keep you in a seat when you're at this angle. So one of two things will happen. Either you will have a front end collision and your neck will get hung up on the seat belt here, or the seatbelt will do effectively nothing and you will submarine out of the seat and smash into the dashboard up front. Neither of those are ideal results. The other reason is your body simply isn't used to experiencing the forces of riding in a car when you are laying down like this. We're used to riding in cars like this, but when you lay down, the forces, the angles of the forces are completely different. I can only speak from personal experience, but when I was sitting like this in the car and the driver hit the accelerator, even mildly aggressively, my stomach ended up in my throat and I ended up feeling very bad. To be clear, that applies to every single zero gravity seat on the market, not just the one in this car, but not every car lets you use it while you're on the move. The zero gravity seat is, however, the only way to enjoy this car's other most interesting feature in the second row, which is the gigantic 32-inch fold-down projector screen, the same one we saw in the back seat of the Ito M9 SUV, and I have the exact same complaints that I had about that car's. However, I will start with some good news. Unlike in the Ito M9, where you could only control the screen via a Huawei phone, this one allows you to control it via the little screen right here. If I take 3 fingers and throw it up, boom, my media is now projected on this large screen, but that's about the only good news I have. Once you take the media that's on this little screen and throw it to the projector screen up there, it has to shrink down the interface in order to accommodate all of the adjustments for the screen itself. That means that it's now way smaller. All of the text is absolutely tiny and nearly illegible, especially when you're laid back like this, no matter how much angle they let you adjust. In addition, look at the huge black margins on either side. There doesn't seem to be a way to actually adjust the image to fit fully onto this screen, which makes me wonder, 1, why didn't they use a smaller screen? Or 2, why didn't they just use like a 27-inch OLED like some other brands are using? You'd be able to see it in actual daylight, unlike this thing, which is essentially invisible. Please note, by the way, that I'm using the official Huawei video app, not some third-party app, so I really don't know why there are these huge black margins. Don't try to adjust your legs, by the way, or you are going to bump into this screen. If you don't feel like risking your life by using the zero gravity seats while the car is on the move, well, you could always sit up and enjoy the projector screen. Except at that point, you'll realize that it's about a hair's breadth from your face. And even when you're that close, the image quality isn't that good because it's a projector and not a regular OLED screen. Again, I'm not entirely sure why they bothered to use this thing. Now, there is a way to block out a lot of the sunlight, which is by hitting a button and activating all of the different privacy kind of filters on the windows and then also the overhead shade, but even then, it's still not particularly high quality. Ultimately, my advice to you is just stick 2 tablets on the back of both seats. There's actually a hole for doing just that. As was the case with Ito, Stelato insists this also acts as a privacy screen between the front row and the second row, which is absolutely true, but also feels like something that they made up at the last minute to justify what they ultimately had to have realized was a kind of useless function. Okay, rant over. Let's talk about the front row. The front row of the S9 also has its own set of interesting design choices, but these are ones that I can more or less live with. Take, for example, the dual-layered dashboard. This is the same kind of thing we saw in the Luxeed S7. As is the case with the S7, I think that the text could be a little bit bigger, but it's still pretty legible. I also like the fact that because of how far away it is, the distance that your eyes have to travel between the road and your driving information on the dashboard is actually lower than it would be, or closer than it would be if you were using a traditional instrument cluster that was much closer to you. Here in the center, we've got a large screen with the Harmony OS. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that because we've seen it in a bunch of cars. No complaints. It's quick, it's pretty, and it works. Final screen, right up here, we have a digital rear view mirror. The rest of the interior design is quite practical. Here in the center console, we have dual wireless charging pads, behind which we've got this storage area, cup holders, a little bit of storage right here, a scent system. Let's see. Sniff test. Ooh, that's nice. Behind that, we've got a center storage cubby. Unlike the Z9 from Denza that we recently reviewed, this does not have a front refrigerator. And honestly, I'm perfectly fine with that because I don't really see the need to have 2 refrigerators in one car, especially when you're talking about a sedan. One area that is not particularly practical is down here below the center console. Most electric sedans here would have a storage area. This would be open, but this one is filled with something. I'm not really sure. What that means is you don't have storage here. All you have is this kind of thin pocket area where you could put, I don't know, your phone or something else that was very thin, like a wallet or a clutch. We're about to take this thing on the road, but first I want to talk about material quality, because as I indicated earlier in the video, I don't have a ton of faith in BAIC to be able to produce a premium vehicle, despite the fact that they have been Mercedes-Benz joint venture partner here in China for decades. Their own brands are, well, they're not premium. And when this car hit the market, there were some complaints about the fit and finish of certain parts of the cabin. All I can say is that the S9 I'm sitting in right now, well, I don't see any glaring quality issues. The materials themselves, that's real wood, that's real leather, and there's enough soft touch throughout that you can lay your head down, let's see, more or less anywhere, like this, and you could be comfortable enough at least for a power nap. All right, enough about that. Let's get behind the wheel. Bear with me for a moment as I tell you how the Stelato S9 became the center of the biggest controversy of the Chinese automotive internet in the year 2024. The short version is this. There was a very established and well-known automotive reviewer who made a video claiming that the suspension tuning on this car was very bad. Bad to the point where it actually jerked the wheel around in his hand when going over a particular bump over a particular bridge. A phenomenon they were not able to recreate while driving other cars from other brands over the same bump. Stelato denied that this was possible and provided their own data to refute his claims, which is totally fair. Then, however, the reviewer's account was banned for about a week on a very popular Chinese social media platform called Weibo, seemingly as a result of this controversy, which, to me, is not fair. I understand companies needing to defend themselves in the court of public opinion, even filing lawsuits in certain very egregious cases of misinformation, but having another reviewer get their account banned seemingly just for sharing their experiences with a car, well, that was something else entirely, and I think it affected the way people chose to talk about this car online, specifically automotive reviewers like myself, in the months after that video came out and after he was banned. People obviously were worried that they might invoke the wrath of Weibo or Huawei or Stelato or BAIC or whoever was behind the ban. Just to be clear, we do not know for sure. I also think that that kind of behavior doesn't speak to a brand that's super confident in the quality of their products, but hey, what do I know? This was way back around August of this year when the car debuted, and everybody's pretty much moved on at this point with the reviewer's account getting unbanned and, interestingly, the road where that whole thing took place getting repaired, so nobody would be able to recreate the exact circumstances of his video. That's very interesting. Anyways, let's talk about the driving dynamics of the Stelato S9. I'm driving a dual motor variant, which means 390 kilowatts and 673 newton meters of torque, good enough for a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time of just 3.9 seconds. Also good enough to hurl the front end into the air under hard acceleration like the prow of a boat. I've driven a lot of big, fast EVs, but man, none of them were this bad in that respect. You can mitigate this somewhat by putting it into sport mode. However, sport mode is accompanied by a sound. I'll just play it for you. I think that's supposed to be like an exhaust for a sports car or something, but the audio quality is like an NES game, so it just ends up sounding like a vacuum.
The steering ratio is also faster than I would expect for a big sedan geared towards cruising comfort, but at least that means you don't have to shift your hands on the wheel during most turns, which is exactly what you don't want to do when you have a weird little square wheel.
The S9 has adaptive air suspension with adjustable height and stiffness, but it is very soft in all of its settings. When you're going over bumpy roads, it actually starts to kind of roll slowly from side to side. I imagine this is a little bit like what it would be like to drive a hovercraft on the road. I was unable to replicate the dramatic behavior shown in the video that I mentioned above, but road conditions here in Shanghai are much better than they are where that video was filmed. Overall, I think the S9 suspension has plenty of room for improvement, but I don't think it was as bad as I expected it to be, especially if you don't drive it aggressively, which should be pretty much all of the time because it's a big premium sedan. And if you get bored of driving, you can always just hit this button.
智驾领航已激活。
The Stelato S9 is equipped with the latest version of Huawei Inside ADAS, and it's probably the most valuable feature on this car. Across multiple journeys and various driving conditions, we had very few interventions beyond the occasional situation where the car needed us to navigate a tunnel or other obstacle. If you're watching from outside the car, it's genuinely hard to tell if it's a human or the car that's doing the driving.
The last system I used that was this good was in the Avatar 07, and in fact it was the same Huawei Inside system. I will say, however, that the experience of the 07 was a little bit better than this car. I think everything just felt a little bit quicker and was a little bit more confident.
That doesn't mean that every car produced by those joint ventures is going to have this kind of issue. After all, the Ito M9 that we drove had much better suspension tuning than the S9, but that's exactly the type of inconsistency that you might encounter when you have so many different partners.
I think the S9 illustrates a major flaw in Huawei's entire car strategy. You see, they have some of the world's most leading technology when it comes to driver assistance and in-car infotainment, but they're not exactly working with leading car manufacturers when it comes time to actually make the cars themselves. It's a little bit like deciding to make a cheeseburger, and so inside you use the world's best burger, the world's best cheese and lettuce and tomato and condiments and so on. And then you take all of that and you put it between two stale pieces of Wonder Bread. It's not going to make a very good cheeseburger. So what should Huawei do? Well, they should do exactly what another Chinese tech company is already doing, Xiaomi. They're making their own cars, and I think Huawei could and should do the same thing. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.